Around half a year after I first started training and not making too much progress, I discovered the strength side of lifting. I became obsessed with strength and I started following Starting Strength, the Novice routine, and I also started reading the book. Soon after, I went to the copy-paste stolen program of Starting Strength, which is Stronglifts 5x5, but I followed that for a while. I ate a shit ton and my main lifts move a lot, but I didn't train arms. I got fat and I got an injury. So right now I'm going to outline the positives and negatives and the fixes to the negatives of these novice programs and the advice that follows it. First of all, let's start with the good. I learned correct technique on these big lifts, which I didn't know before, which meant that when I started these, my technique was just outrageous to most movements, but they improved a lot. Also, I got way stronger on the big lifts that were in the program. I also learned about progression schemes because before that I didn't have an idea about how to progress. I just progressed when I felt like it. And I started tracking my workouts. So these were the good practices that I implemented from following these routines. But let's look at the bad stuff.
So let's talk about the bad. First of all, minimalist training advice. If there's one thing that doesn't work in bodybuilding, it's minimalism. And of course, the reason why it's always present is because there's always people that make it work, but it's usually the genetic outliers. And so even if somebody got a relatively complete physique off of these programs, they don't grow your calves, arms, because there's no isolation for them. There's also the strong dogmatism of these programs. Like they tell you, you have to do this and do it this way. No flexibility, you cannot do what you want. And I understand that for novices this might be important, but again, the beginning of your training journey is very important. It's like childhood. If you got beaten and yelled at when you were 3 years old, it will affect how you experience the rest of your life and how you choose to deal with conflicts. The same with novice programs. If they be into you that when you reach 5x5 you have to go up in weight and you can only do compounds and you shouldn't do arms and shouldn't do calls, then even after doing these programs and switching to another one, you will do the same shit again. Next is the rep scheme of 5x5. I mostly follow Stronglifts, so that's why I'm talking about 5x5, and because it's a shittier rep scheme. I don't use many static references in my training either, and it's for a reason, because it just works better to have a rep range and try to always fall into that. Because you get fatigued during the sets, and your last set you won't be able to perform as well as in your first set. And this is why 5x5 is shit, because even if you complete 5x5, if the first set you could get 5 and it was intense, there's no way you're going to get 5 on the last one as well. And then again, if you do a 5x5, the first set was nothing. 3x5 is a bit better, but it's still not the best. One of the biggest problems is squat over focus. I don't see any point in making novices squat 3 times a week while barely doing any upper body. It's not like this squat is superior or anything. And yes, squatting 5x5 or 3x5 3 times a week will get you big legs, but it will also get you other things. Fatigue, overuse injuries, death. I mean, you won't die. I'm just saying that as the weights get heavier, eventually you'll always be very close to failure, and you're going to do 5 sets of heavy squats 3 times a week with the same rep range with 1 day of rest in between. Bro, that's going to get back on you. I know it because it got back on me, and there's really no point in doing it. The next thing is not enough upper body volume. In general, on these programs you barely train your upper body, and even when you do, it's pretty poorly programmed. Both on OHP, barbell rows and bench press, you're getting 1.5 times per week frequency, which is really bad. Okay, you want to get at least twice a week frequency. And there's also nothing else. Like these 3 exercises is the upper body and that's all. These programs with promoting constant weight jumps, they provide you a sense of urgency. They tell you that you have to always jump weights as quick as possible, which is just bullshit. If, for an example, you got 5 sets of 5 but you felt like your technique was a bit bad, you can retake the weight. It will not kill you and you will still make gains from it. Progressive overload is not just weight on the bar, it's also sets and reps. What the fuck is going on? But it's also form improvement. Next problem is obvious, no isolation. Also, there's no intensity management, or I don't know how you should say this, but what I mean is RPE or percentages. Now, do I use any of these? Actually, not really. I rely on instinct, but I usually do not go to failure. But back then I didn't know about this. Nobody told me to not go to failure. And so basically I would go like almost to failure 3 times a week on squats. And it's kind of bullshit and not a very safe practice. And I understand this for beginners, RPE is not going to be the best RPE. Even the reason why I don't use it anymore is because I realized that it isn't very reliable. And then percentages, well, yeah, you don't want to like make them calculate everything because they're just fucking beginners. But at least somewhere there should be the advice of do not go ham all the time. Okay, if you're really weak, it doesn't matter, but eventually you get to the point where on these programs, especially, it will be really stressful to go balls to the wall all the time. And nobody tells you this, or at least nobody who promotes these kinds of programs. But correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, maybe somebody says that, but I've never heard it. And then one of the biggest problems is retard dietary practices. The main one being GOMAD, which is gallon of milk a day. I think what proves how big of a bullshit GOMAD is the fact that even the people who want to start GOMAD or who already started GOMAD, they make posts on Reddit like, is GOMAD safe? Like, they know themselves that it's kind of iffy, it's a shady thing to do, because you don't hear anybody else tell you this, because it's bad. It's cookie cutter bullshit and it gets you fat, or at least it gets most people fat. Yeah, it might triple your squat, but what you gain is not necessarily all muscle. Actually, probably most of it will be just fat. Just in general, shit like dirty bulking is very encouraged, and just gain a bunch of weight. If you're a skinny dude, just gain a bunch of weight. You don't need that. Slow weight gain is always going to be better, and believe me, if you're proud of yourself that in the past month you gained 5 pounds, you will regret it later. And then the false promises, because of course you have to market these programs. You have to tell people that they work. And something that I think it was in the book, I'm not sure, but I think it was in the Starting Strength book quite a couple of times, is you will get steroid-like results. And that your results will be so good that people will think you're on gear. The only thing people will think is that you've got fat as fuck. I can assure you, people will not think you're on gear. You won't think that your results are very extreme. Chances are you will also think deep down that you look like shit. And again, chances are it's actually true. And also when it comes to adding accessory work, I think the guy who did Stronglifts said that even if you want to add accessory work for arms and stuff, at first do the program without those for X amount of time, and your progress and your results will be so good that you will realize that you don't even need that, and you will not even want to add them in your program anymore. That's bullshit. And then overuse injuries. Obviously, if you're going to hammer hard, heavy squats 3 times a week and always just the same type of style of squat, it's going to make you plateau and like overuse injuries, bro. It makes sense to sometimes swap these out, or at least don't do the exact same movement 3 times a week. And then 2 big rest periods, because we hear the 3 5-minute rest periods. You don't need 5 minutes of rest, okay? The results of doing most of these programs is that eventually, as the weights get heavier and heavier, you will do more and more rest, and that pretty much kills your work capacity, and it will also give you really long workouts. Now, since pinpointing mistakes alone is probably not that useful, here's my improvement for beginners for the mistakes of these programs and practices. Instead of the 3 times a week squat frequency in Stronglifts and Starting Strength, do twice a week. For example, if you train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can have a squat on Monday and Friday, and on Wednesday you can either not even train legs, because twice a week frequency will probably be enough, but if you want to train legs, you can do something like a split squat, or maybe even a leg extension, or a hack squat, leg press, anything like that. Also, you don't even have to squat twice a week. You can squat only once a week and then do something else for your legs another time, or even train as 3 times. Squat once, do maybe a leg press or a head squat the other time, and then a leg extension on the third. Then for curing the bench frequency, do at least twice a week benching. If you do more than twice a week, the third should be a variation, or just random pec work. It could be a pec fly, but it could be a bench variation as well. Incline bench or dumbbell bench, incline dumbbell bench, machine chest press, anything like that. You can reduce the 5x5 to a 3x8 if you insist on a static rep range, but even better would be to not do a static rep scheme. Now, there's many ways of flexible progressing. For your strength work, like squat and bench press, for example, you could set a rep range like 3 sets of 4 to 8, and you could do dynamic double progression, which means that if you get 8, 7, 6, the next week on the first set you will do higher weight, and on all of the other sets the same weight as last time, because you got to the top of the rep range. This is dynamic double progression. You can do an evolving rep range. So if your first set reaches 8, which is the top of the rep range, you increase your weight on all of the sets. You can do a rep goal system, which is just staying in the rep range within all of your sets. And when you reach a certain number of reps total from your 3 sets, you move up in weight. You can pick any of these. In reality, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter
All of these are going to be better than a static rep range. Deadlifts can stay at a set of 5, but don't do it at the end of your workout. Do it in the beginning. And also you can do some sort of Romanian deadlift or a good morning in a 6 to 10 or 8 to 12 rep range for maybe 2 sets. 2 sets is enough for beginners. What I would completely delete from the program is barbell rows. For some reason I try to do barbell rows every year, but I always just realize why I don't do them usually. You can't properly progress in them, eventually you're just going to cheat. And so for back instead I would recommend a twice a week frequency, and you can do one pull-up variation and one rowing variation. For rowing variation, something that takes out the lower back and something that doesn't let you cheat will be probably the best. So something like a C row or a dumbbell row. You can do 8 to 12 on these, and I don't know, like 3 sets or something. Also add biceps and tricep isolation. Within the tricep isolation, add at least one exercise that has emphasis on the long head. You can do this 2-3 times a week for 2 to 3 sets, 6 to 10 or 8 to 12. Then again, add side and rear delt isolation at least twice a week. And for these, a higher rep range will be better, 10 to 12 or 10 to 15 even.
It's also a good idea, in my opinion, to add calf isolations at least twice a week to your program and around 2 to 4 sets. But according to the opinion of the creator of Stronglifts 5x5, it is a bad idea. Why? Because he says that if you have shit calf genetics, even if you will be able to grow them, they won't look good, so there's no point in training them. Have you heard a more miserable cope than that? He says squats and deadlifts work your calves. We've talked about this before, guys. They work your calves, they don't target them. And he goes on to say that if you have high calf insertions, your calves are never going to stick out no matter how big you get them, so it's not even worth training them. And then he says that he dated a skinny girl who only weighed 45 kgs, which is like 90 pounds or something, but had bigger calves than him. And this is a power lifter who gives out dogmatic fitness advice to people who want a better physique, not necessarily better lifts, but a better physique. Just how shameful is that, dating a girl that has bigger calves than you? I'm not saying it never happened to me, but it's still shameful. But I completely disagree with the if you have shit calf genetics, just don't train them bro advice. What if I have bad strength genetics? Should I not do Stronglifts 5x5? Should I not even lift? This is the most stupid argument that can be made ever. In reality, you cannot even know how good your genetics are, and even if you knew how good they were, what does it matter? Just train, dude, and imagine that you have the best fucking genetics in the world and you're going to make the best gains in the world. It might not be true, but as this dude said, if you have bad genetics, why should you even train? Which again, I don't agree with, but why don't you just think that you have good genetics? Like, how do you know what type of genetics you have? You have no idea what you're capable of until you've done it. So why not just do it? Have you seen how skinny Sebum was before he started lifting? Or let's give a natural example. Have you seen natural hypertrophy? The dude's huge and he's been lifting for, I believe, more than a decade. And he said numerous times that for several years, he just made shit gains. So stop going on with this genetics bullshit and train your calves. 6 sets a week of calves won't kill you, you can superset them. Do them hard, and if your calves don't experience any growth, just change up your shit until they do. And with calves, usually higher rep ranges are advised. I don't know about that shit, but what I know is that I don't think you should go above 20 reps. The reason why is because the burn just becomes so excruciating that you're not going to be able to go to failure. And this is usually applicable to most muscles and most movements, but especially to calves. Then also I would add ab isolations at least twice a week for 3 sets per workout. And then in terms of diet, instead of just drinking a gallon of milk a day and eating a shit ton and getting fat as fuck, maybe just try to lean bulk. Gain 2 pounds a month, or maybe even just a pound a month, or as little as you can. Just make sure you gain something if you're skinny. And if you're overweight and you're fat, you can even recomp. And in terms of your approach to training, I say don't focus on weight jumps. If you top out the rep range, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to jump weight the next time. You can do the same weights and same reps again, and you will still get enough stimulus from it. Your technique will probably improve. That is also a form of progressive overload. If your goal is to get a good physique and not to become a fat mediocre powerlifter, what you need to chase is not the weights but the stimulus. With all respect though, you should still not do the same weight and same reps all the time. You still have to progress. I'm just saying that you can retake the same weight, same reps a couple of times, but I would say no more than 3 times, and maybe even 2. Like, as a beginner, I think you can progress faster than that. Also, this dude says that The 80-20% rule, it's here again, dictates that most of your results will come from just these compounds, and so you shouldn't even do any isolations. This is even worse than what we talked about previously. Like, I have a video, you can check it out here, where I talk about the dogmatic rule of 80% compounds and 20% isolations, but this says 80% of your results will come from these compounds, so don't even do isolations, just skip them. And skip everything that's not these 5 or 6 compounds, I don't know. Guys, the 80-20% rule was not made for lifting. If you don't know what the whole 80-20% rule is, it's just a rule that 80% of your results will come from 20% of your effort, and then the next 20% is going to come from the next 80% of your effort, yeah. This is true to lifting as well, but not in a way that most people implement it. Most people say, yeah, okay, then do 80% compound, 20% isolation, because the 80-20% rule dictates that. No, it doesn't. What it dictates is that if you do a pretty good program in the gym, you sleep pretty well, and then your diet is also fairly good, you'll make quite a lot of gains. But in order to squeeze out the 100% of your gains, you will need to completely dial in your training, your food, your sleep, the amount of stress in your life, your work, your micronutrients you're eating, your warm-ups, your rest days, your friends, your water intake, your testosterone dosage. This is what it truly means, so don't bastardize this. And then also regarding diet, GOMAD will never give you a six-pack, dude. But if you want a six-pack, you can watch my last video where I tell you how to get that. So click here to watch it.